Alright, welcome here. This is Chapter 5, Day number 2 notes. This is writing linear equations in slope-intercept form. This little warm-up at the top, I'm going to just kind of more point through it. I did the problems for you previously. I stacked my ordered pairs. I calculated the slope to be -1 over -2, which gave me a slope of 1/2. This problem was just asked me to find the slope, so I calculated the slope. Question 2 says if something is in slope-intercept form, what do we get from it? Well, y equals mx plus b is slope-intercept form. The m represents the slope, the b represents the y-intercept. Again, quick little recap of some things we've done previously. Problem number 3 is going to ask me to graph a problem that starts out in this is standard form. So I work to solve for y equals by subtracting 2x from both sides, divide by 3, and I get y equals -2/3 x plus 4. I know that my slope is -2 divided by 3, or I can write it as +2 divided by -3. Both those are a negative value, which would have a slope that's negative and going downhill. And then my b value is 4, which I can plot as 0, 4 on this graph, down 2 and over 3, down 2 and over 3. Draw my line in here, and I have a pretty little, linear function here. As we slide to the next part of this, I'm going to start filling out these notes. If we want to write an equation in slope-intercept form, we first are going to find the slope. Quick reminder is that this goes back to Chapter 4, that there is number 1 thing we have to do. The next thing is we need to find the y-intercept. Remember that the y-intercept is this b value. And then we want to rewrite this equation using that m value we got and the b value we got in y equals mx plus b form. So these first couple, let's keep this really easy, right? It says y equals mx plus b form. We want to write it in slope-intercept form. They tell me that the slope is -2. They also tell me that the y-intercept is 5, which tells me my m value is -2, my b value is 5. Therefore, my equation is y equals -2x plus 5. I get that by substituting in here for m, the -2. I'm substituting 5 in there for b. I am going to do likewise, again, write y equals mx plus b. We're writing it in slope-intercept form. They tell me here that the slope is -1/4. And they tell me the y-intercept is 0. Well, when I write this, this is going to be y is equal to, again, the m value is -1/4 x plus 0. Because adding 0 is equivalent to the first part of the function, which is just -1/4 x, we can write this final equation as y equals -1/4 x. We do not need to leave the plus 0 in there. If I slide down to the second one here, it says, can we write an equation that is going to have, again, the slope of 0? So as I look at y equals mx plus b, I know that m is equal to 0, and that passes through 0, -9. But remember, 0, -9 would be this point down here, which is called the y-intercept. So that reminds me that b here is -9. When I write this, I get y equals 0 times x plus -9. We know, though, that 0 times x is 0, and 0 plus -9 is going to give me the equation y equals -9. And maybe a quick reminder is, I'm going to put this in a different color, is that if we have a line that has a slope of 0, we know that this is a horizontal line. All right. Travel it on. Only difference here is that it asks us to write an equation in y equals mx plus b form by looking at a graph. Well, if I want to look at the graph, I need to first determine my m value. So my m value is determined by, in this case here, we're going down 3. Oh, careful here. That's not down 3, that is only down 2. Down being negative, and over, that's going to be 5. So I know that my m value here is -2 divided by 5. I also know that my b value, I'm going to change colors on this here. I know that my b value is the y-intercept, which is on the y-axis, which is this point right here, which was 0, 3, which tells me my b value is 3. So when we write y equals mx plus b form, this is going to be -2/5 times x plus 3. As I look at the next two we're going to follow the same idea. I'm going to count the slope from the picture. So this has me going up 1, 2, 3, up being positive, and it has me going over just 1. So if I look at the slope here, the slope is going up 3 and over 1, which will be a slope of 3. If I look at this point right here, this point here is the y-intercept, which was 0, -2, which helps to tell me b is -2. If we want to write the equation in y equals mx plus b form, we are going to get 3x minus 2 is equal to y. The last one we have here, this problem 2 over here, is going to have us go down 1, so that's -1 in the rise or run direction, in the rise direction, and then we're going to move to the right running 4 units. This is going to give me a slope that is -1/4. If I take a look at this point right here, again, we know that that is the point that is on the y-axis. It's called the y-intercept, which is 0, 2, which helps to tell me my b value is -2. B value is +2. Here we have y equals mx plus b. As we substitute in, this is -1/4 times x plus 2. All right. Sometimes they don't give you a picture. Sometimes they give you 2 ordered pairs. Every now and then, we're lucky enough here that as we read this, sometimes they give you a y-intercept as one point, and then they give you this other point that we have to deal with. Well, I started out here, I wrote down the slope formula, I stacked my points here, and I'm going to calculate the slope here quickly to be -1 minus -5, that's top minus bottom, over 3 minus 0. This is going to give me 4 divided by 3 as my slope. I do need to take a look here and determine what is going to be the y-intercept. Well, I know that the y-intercept in this problem is given by this point right here. And I'm going to go with highlighting it in yellow. We know that that point right there is our y-intercept. Because if I plotted that point would be at 0, -5. So I know that b here is -5. If I want to write my equation now, writing my equation, I'm going to get y is equal to mx plus b. The slope we found to be was 4/3. The b value was subtracting 5 or adding -5. A couple more problems here to practice. I'm going to run through them again quickly. You might want to pause and go back and rewatch if necessary. But I stacked my points. I subtracted my y values, 6 minus 5. Subtracted my x values, 0 minus 5. And I end up here with a slope that is 1 divided by -5, or -1 divided by 5, or the negative of 1/5. I also know here that 0, 6 is the y-intercept, which tells me b is equal to 6. So my equation ends up becoming y is equal to -1/5 x plus 6 when I write this in slope-intercept form. I'm going to change up the colors so that it doesn't get confusing on here. Again, we're in a graph we're going to stack the points here. As I write here the slope, I'm going to do top minus bottom for the y's and top minus bottom for the x's. This is 24 divided by 6, which is 4 over 1, which is 4. I do notice here that 0, negative 11 is what is called my y-intercept. So we know that b is equal to negative 11. When we write this equation then, y equals mx plus b is y equals 4x minus 11. As I look at the last two here, again, I do need to recognize here that, it says the x-intercept is negative 1. Well, if I'd like to write that as a point, that is negative 1 comma 0. So again, I would like to stack these points here and work to calculate the slope. As I go to calculate the slope, top minus bottom, so negative 2 minus 0 is divided by 0 minus negative 1. That's negative 2 divided by positive 1, which is negative 2. I do have to be careful here because I want to talk about the y-intercept, and the y-intercept is the point that lies on the y-axis, giving me a y value, which is this one here. So 0, negative 2 is my y-intercept, also making the b value negative 2. And when I write the equation in slope-intercept form, it's negative 2x minus 2 is equal to y. Please note that this is an x-intercept. The x-intercept is not what we'd want to use in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is referring to the y-intercept. All right, here we're given a y-intercept. Given a y-intercept, we know that this ordered pair is 0, negative 1, because that's the y value when x is 0. Again, I'm going to stack these points and go through the calculation of finding the slope. We're going to do top minus bottom, so 6 minus negative 1, and negative 5 minus 0. That's 7 divided by negative 5, which is negative 7/5, which could also be written as the opposite of 7/5. I do want to talk about the y-intercept. The point that represents the y-intercept here is 0, negative 1. So I know here that b is negative 1. And then when I write the equation, y equals mx plus b, that's negative 7/5 x minus 1. We got some very good practice here. And the last thing I would like to wrap up here is that we'd like to talk about what happens when we get into some word problems. Well, we shouldn't be overly intimidated by the word problems because we do know that in y equals mx plus b form, that the m represents the slope, but the slope is also dealing with what is thought of as a rate of change. We have the b value, which can represent the y-intercept, and in a model problem might be corresponding to like an initial value, we'll say. So let's read this scenario here. As we read this, it says the Dance Academy charges $20 to use the facility and $25 per hour of instruction. Well, we know that $25 per hour is representing something that is called a rate of change. It's a rate of change because it's telling you how something changes per hour. So if you went for 1 hour, it'd be $25 plus possibly a fee. If you went for 2 hours, it's 2 times 25. If you went for 10 hours, that's 10 times 25. So we know here that the rate of change m is $25 per 1 hour. The starting value was given over here where it says, you know what, I just have to pay $20 to use the facility. Doesn't matter how many hours I use it for, I have to pay 20 up front. So in part B here, it says, can you write the equation of what is going on in this problem? Well, if I want to write this, I know that because I have an m and a b value, because I have a rate of change and an initial value, I'm going to write this over here as a reminder. This is an initial fee, or this is an initial cost to use the facility. So when I go to write this equation here in part B, I get y is equal to, this is $25 times the number of hours plus the $20 fee. And again, they didn't have us define variables, but I would remind you that it would be very important that we understand, what does x represent? This is the number of hours of instruction. And what does y represent? This is going to be the cost of, what do we want to call it here? Cost of dance instruction. Because when we move down here to part C, it says, can you find the total cost for 2 hours of dance instruction? Well, what this is telling me is 2 hours of dance instruction. I recall back here that x is the number of hours instruction. What this is asking me to do is to consider the scenario where can we let x equal 2 using this function right here. So if I let x equal 2, I know that I'm going to get y is equal to $25 per hour multiplied by those 2 hours plus that initial fee of $20, which is 50 plus 20, which y is going to be equal to 70. I would remind you to answer in a sentence form. So what that sentence is going to say is that it will cost $70 to, or I'll say it will cost $70 for 2 hours of dance instruction. And this is at that given, I'm going to call it a studio. I'm not sure exactly what they said, but we do want to recognize that we're having an input, 2 hours, as related to the output. And then last but not least here, it says how much would it cost, or sorry, how many hours would you have if you spent $145 for dance instruction? Well, $145 is going to be representing here the cost, which is y. So what this problem is asking me to consider is what happens if we let y equals $145. Well, we can set this up using that same $145 is equal to 25 times x plus 20. We're going to solve this equation for x. We get 125 is equal to 25x. Divide by 25, and x is equal to 5. Again, reminder is to write something in sentence form. You would receive 5 hours of instruction if you spent $145. And again, that's just bringing some meaning back to, what do 5 and 145 represent? That there is a wrap on day number 2 notes. Thank you so much, and have yourselves a great day.